I met my wife at the gym. Like, health and fitness is a large part of our life. It'll always be part of our life. And we loved working out together. But having, I've got a 6, a 4, a 2, and a 6 month old. So like that dynamic, and her being a stay at home mom, and me having, a very unorthodox job where, I travel and speak. I'm in an airport at least, once a week, sometimes more than that. But we're like, well, it would make sense if we had a gym at home. And like, for me, it's like, man, there's not a week that goes by that someone either like recognizes me and like asks me questions, or I'm wearing something and it prompts a conversation, or it's so funny. I'll share this story, and then you can take over your podcast, and I'll stop talking. But someone came up to me, and I was in a hurry, and our kid was like 2 months old, and I had not gotten a ton of sleep, and I had a ton of speaking engagements about to happen. So I'm like preparing for 5 different talks, and I'm just like, I'm in a hurry, I'm tired, I'm frustrated. And this guy came up to me, he's like, hey, can I work in with you on the cables? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. So it was like the standalone cables that were adjustable. And I did my set. I was doing like pretty much high to low flies, and he was looking to do like a mid fly, so he was changing the thing. And I was like, look, if you're going to change where it is, like, why don't you just like let me finish, and then you can hop on. He was like, well, I can't use it. I was like, well, I'm in a hurry, bro, so no, you can't move the and then he like left, like kind of like we caught eyes, and I was like, whatever you want to happen can happen. And he left. And then I thought about it for a minute. I was like, man, I was like, I could have handled that better. And then I went and found him, and I was like, hey, man, I'm tired. I've got a newborn essentially at home, and I could have responded to that differently. I was a little bit of a douchebag, and I'm sorry. And we have been like, we're not like close friends. We haven't hung out, but I talk to him almost every day now. And it's like, when we think about our witness as followers of Jesus, it's sometimes how like we respond to adversity, or where we blow it and we apologize, like, because no one's perfect. But when you fall and you scrape your knee, how you get up and you respond to adversity matters. And sometimes like that is a more powerful witness than saying the right thing. So I thought it was just like a cool moment. So like stuff like that, it's like makes me hard pressed to think, well, should I just work out at home? Like that would be easy. But man, I always have so many opportunities to connect with people in the gym. So
Yeah, too, because you ran some clubs, man, and I talk a lot about the community aspect. I tell young guys that are searching for their place in this world, like, if you don't know what you're doing career wise, like, get a job working at a gym. Like, the amount of people that I met in my early 20s that have been lifetime relationships, the amount of business opportunities that have come, because the gym is like a filter of, you're now with people that take health, development, prioritize these things. And it's like, okay, we want to surround ourselves with people. Then you throw on, like you said, a Jesus shirt, right? Like I had one on yesterday, Jesus takes naps, be like Jesus, like Mark 24/7. I forget the actual scripture, but it's like every time I wear that, it's like the little old lady, like kind of on the bicycle, she'll like wave at me, like, I love your shirt, or like it'll spark a conversation with somebody that I wouldn't have had a chance to talk to. I wouldn't have had a chance to maybe share what I do. And it's just been awesome. And we talked about guys like Weatherford and kind of what's happening down there in Dallas. Like, same thing for me, man. And gym will always be a part of my life.
yeah, there's a young dude that I would love to connect with you. His name's Doug Elks, and he runs this organization called AIM. And he just gathers together, like young, like high capacity studs, and they just, they gather, they worship, they work out, and they're just like, hey, it's predominantly a bunch of like 20 somethings that, they're out of college, but they're trying to figure out, what does my life look like as a man? How do I, lead myself? How do I lead others? But man, I think what you just said is so important. Like, if you don't know what to do, like, get a job or put yourself in a gym and go there early in the morning, because like people who are consistent, and people who, that adhere to, okay, discipline is health and fitness, and discipline is part of my life. Like those are all like, not exclusively, but more often than not, you're going to find high capacity leaders in there, and you're going to find opportunities. Like that's the best place in the world to network. And if like, if I'm at a conference speaking and I go to the gym at like 5 or 6 a.m., like the top dogs are always in there with me. And it's like, because it's like, it'd be so easy to stay up, just because, like there was an after party, or like people are like cigars, or whatever. And it's like they still get up. They still get up because they're disciplined and it matters. And for me, it allows me to have mental focus and it allows me to be better in my day. So it's like, if you put yourself in those spaces, to the person, it's like, man, I'm looking for better friends. I'm looking for, a community. Man, put yourself in places where like high capacity people play. And then in the same thing, it's like, if you're looking for a relationship or things like that, like go where healthy people are and you'll find a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that you and your wife met in the gym. The one I'm been dating, and it's been almost coming up on a year now. Like I met her 10 years ago in the gym, and we had, working out. I'd see her regularly, and then we spent 3 years kind of having coffee together at church. And it was like, so there's this foundation of our relationship, and we're both committed to like, in the future, just always having that there. I want to ask you a question because you're talking about this aim and this young man, Doug. One thing that I'm optimistic about, Josh, is like when I look across kind of the social landscape, when I kind of, see the things that are popping up online, I see kind of these subcultures that are being, built up kind of in areas like Dallas, maybe here in Tampa. You see this wave of young men that are leading Christ first. I think they say Generation Z is the highest percentage of kind of conservative Christians since maybe the boomer generation. Just curious your thoughts on kind of like, where do you see this like coming from? Like what's the root of this? It's a great thing that it's happening. And just how do you see this kind of maybe shaping the next 5, 10, 20 years, the social landscape, but also just in society as well?
Yeah. So I'll start with the bad and I'll end with the good. So it's like, what's true is we live in the most connected generation in the history of time, while simultaneously being the most disconnected generation in the history of time, in its totality. And I think in the same way where we saw this, 160, 1,600% growth regarding OnlyFans consumption, where there was a huge spike in people who were on the platform, consumers of the platform. And this is all happening in 2020, so in the middle of COVID, where people are isolated. Anyone that is very systematic and they love their rhythm, and that is good for their mental and emotional health. This guy, I found it like really difficult. Like, how do I adapt to a new normal? And if you don't have a strong foundation, when something that is like a rhythm is shaken, if you don't have something that is firm to lean on, then you're going to fall apart. And what happened was, a lot of people went one way, and a lot, there was a few people that went another. And it's like, man, if Jesus is Lord over everything, then he is Lord over social media. And maybe in this time, I'm going to use what I got to do what I can. And people started creating these subcultures of these Bible studies and these weekly connects, and they're like, hey, even if I can't make it to where you are, we're going to connect with regularity. We're going to form this consistent bond of brothers, and we're going to do that. And I think like what we're living in today, 4 years removed from that, is the fruit of people really hungry for community. And I see this often, like, what is Gen Z, what is Gen Alpha hungry for? Authenticity, community. They don't want the fluff. They don't want the BS. Like, they don't want that. It's like, be real with me. Tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I need to do. Let's connect. If we're gonna do something, do what you say, and say what you mean. And I think we're on the cusp of seeing both a mental health crisis because of what OnlyFans provided people an opportunity to step into, but also we're seeing an uprising of young leaders that said, "Hey, this is not our ideal, but I'm going to do what I can where I can." And they were poured into by people. They sought mentorship. They saw and they read books. They poured into themselves. They created disciplines. And so I think it's like we see these two tides rising where there's so much chaos in this broken world, but at the same time there's so much hope because more people than ever before, they're not looking to one person to lead them. They're saying, hey, if I lead myself, I can become something that matters. And then you learn that. It's like, well, the thing that matters most to anyone is like when something is impactful to me and I learn something, the instinctual thing that is in us is to give it away. So like, man, if I learn how to lead myself, man, I should teach other people to lead themselves. And then we should gather together and talk about how we lead ourselves in a community. And then we should go out into our sub communities and lead others there. And like that is what the book of Acts is about. Like the book of Acts is this more like apostolistic, this apostle driven church where it's like, hey, it's not about one person, outside of Christ. It's not about one preacher or one church. It's like, hey, we're called to be ambassadors for Christ everywhere we go. And we have to have a relationship with Jesus. We need to lead ourselves and then we need to lead others. So it's not about this like very heavy, like consumeristic culture. We're called to be doers. We're not called to just listen. We're called to do. And I think like that's what's changing. We've got a lot of stuff that we're going to have to deal with because of OnlyFans and, the byproduct of pornography consumption continuing to spike, but at the same time, there's so much hope because of young leaders stepping into places and then people who were poured into pouring into them. And that's where I try to allot most of my time pouring into people because my life, a decade removed from who I used to be, my life is different because people invited me into rooms that I didn't have any business being, in, and there were people that took the time they didn't have to pour into me. And for me, I showed up and I continue to show up. And like to the person listening, it's like, man, how do I change my life? Well, take an assessment of what you're doing, remove the fluff and the stuff that's not helping you get to where you want to go and show up. And when I mean show up, it's like, man, if you're not going to show up and, if you're at a leadership event, if you're not taking notes, if there's something that you don't take away that you actually do, you wasted your time. It's like you can, go to all the talks and the conferences and the phone calls, but like if there's nothing that actually comes out of it, you're just consuming. If I don't take something out of it that I can apply to myself and then go into the world and do something practical, we're wasting our time. So, I mean, that's my hope for people, and that's a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, man, I am hopeful for the young men and women who are stepping into places and leading themselves and leading others well.